Welcome back to Indie Ball Nation. We're getting back on the video grind here because I kind of figured out how I can do the scheduling. So we'll get into that later. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we'll swing it. Maybe we won't promise anything because I always do and then it turns out shaky. Doesn't matter. I've been detoxing after that Noko deep dive, which if you didn't catch it, probably good on you. It was like 2.5 hours into like the inner operations of a garbage fire. But if you did, thanks for checking that out. And we'll see where that goes out in Windsor, Colorado. It has now a travel team. But luckily for everyone, me, you, the world, them, frankly, we're not talking about Noko today. We're not talking Pioneer League today. It's report card time. Because I like the idea of doing report cards. Used to work in a school. Used to go to school like many people. And I think it's good to sort of keep tabs on how things are going and not just, arrive at the end of the year and go, how do we get here? Let's get a track record. Let's get some expectations set. Let's get some understanding of where we've been and where we are now. And we're going to start the process of report cards with today's video/podcast talking about the Atlantic League giving out first quarter report cards. But Ryan, it's not the first quarter anymore. We're well past it. First of all, what are you, the cops? Secondly, time's an abstract concept. We've been over this. So we're going to do it now, okay? I like to give people a lot of room to breathe, time to work things out in the first quarter. Let's be a little beneficial here. Speaking of being beneficial with report cards, we're going to go quick sidebar here. This has jarred some memories. There's probably blocked memories, frankly. There was a 3-year stretch of my life where I went to private school. I went to Catholic school a bunch. I don't know if that's evident or not. We'll deal with it later. But I went to like private school for 3 years. Bad idea. Just a bad idea, man. Like a bunch of people in my family, all the guys in my family, like one side of my family, kind of went there. Everyone else seemed to work it out just fine. Your boy didn't. That probably tracks if you're familiar with me at all. But when it came report card time, I think you think of report cards, everyone gets it handed out in the beginning of the day or whatever in your homeroom. Normal. It's just occurring to me how weird it was at this prep school I went to. At some point over the course of like 2 to 3 days, the president of the school, this was a middle school, high school. I was in middle school. The president of both schools would show up and he would like knock on the door and basically like the Grim Reaper be like, and start calling people out one by one. And then you would go out there and you have to sit with him. They would pull 2 desks out there, sit with him, and he'd go over your report card with you. Oh, what do we do? What? That was not good for me. I broke a 3 GPA like once, and then it was just like, boo, pretty straightforward. Didn't learn a lot of algebra, but I'm pretty sure that's a pretty whatever slope formula there. It was a dumpster fire. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to show up to your ballpark and give you a report card. Just, check the video. Disagree with me. It's fine. It's what we do. Anyway, where were we? We should get this started. In that spirit, we'll do alphabetical order, though. We're going to call you out one by one here, and we'll do some report cards. You'll notice as well, if you're on video, this is not the normal recording setup. This is, we'll call it the alternate studio. Because I share the office where I record with my wife, and she has a big girl job that she's doing. Disgusting. Continuing. Alphabetical order. Let's talk about the Charleston Dirty Birds here. Charleston Dirty Birds are 21-20. They're 8 games back in the South so far. 16-10 in their last 26 after a 5-10 start, so that's good. Things are looking up. Comfortably, I would say the second best pitching staff in the league right now. Kyle McGowan looks great. They'll need it. They've lost Kevia Sampson, who was impressive in his first few outings. On the negative side, though, the offense is a mess. They're striking out way too much considering that they're the worst power hitting lineup in the league. Like, you're used to that trade-off. They'll hit for power, but they're going to swing and miss a bunch. You can't be both. That's not how that works offensively, friends. Which is strange for PJ Phillips' team because they're usually power hitting and hit offense first, and we'll figure out the rest later. So this is a weird flip. Hate to pick on guys, but BJ Lopez and Jonathan Soto behind the plate, they're combined, brace yourselves, 10 for 112 as like what has to be one of the worst hitting tandems in professional baseball. I hate to be that guy, but it is what it is. And look, you can get away with that because only one of them is in the lineup on any given day for the most part. but they're blending into a bottom half of the lineup that looks completely lost like 2 out of 3 days at this point. They're really struggling to keep momentum. They seem fully reliant on pitching in these games. Despite improving some, it is tough to ignore that expectations were pretty high going into the year. Went to the championship last year. They have a difficult second half ahead. The problem is because PJ does tend to build a team that builds throughout the year, but their second half is, I think, when I worked it out, at least based on preseason projections, which what does that mean now? But they were projected to have the biggest jump in opposition talent from the first half to the second half of any team in the league. So that's a tough scene. This first half has turned into a wasted opportunity for them, unfortunately. They do have some really key bullpen guys to back up a solid rotation. They're finding a bit of that rhythm. As I said, the pitching staff is great. They've looked extremely solid as a team on days when the offense shows up. They've held their own against some of the league leading teams, including the Rockers, which is key. So I'm going to give them a C+ for now. A lot of room for moving up, but this could also turn south pretty quick. I don't expect it to, but the C+ is a good baseline to get things going. Staying in the South Division, let's talk about the Gastonia Ghost Peppers. They are 16-25, 13 games out in the South. Shocking, frankly. I mean, this team's attendance is looking good, so we'll start there, which seems strange to lead with. But those who know this organization know that it's a big deal that they're getting fan support, and that's kind of goal number one is sort of off the field. But it's hard to say that when you've come so close to championships the past several years, and it feels like every year they're just inching closer. For what we've seen this first half, it's, as I said, it's shocking. I hate to repeat myself, but it is what it is. They entered the season with the best projections in the league, but they are in the bottom of the division right now. The pitching has suffered injuries. They've fallen well behind the league average on that front. You can only coach where you can coach, right? But the starting pitching just has been left kind of without an anchor right now. The lineup's competitive, but they have not gotten as much as projected. Usually the offense is like kind of an overpowering force for Gastonia, but they're just missing production from guys like Patrick Mazeka and Kevin Watson Jr., who really projected to be key parts of this lineup. It just hasn't been there so far. They're currently 13 games behind High Point, 5 games behind Charleston, Southern Maryland, if I'm looking at the standings today. This is going to make wildcard races difficult because the problem is, for a reminder of playoff system, it's 2 halves. Both winners, division winners for both halves make the playoffs. However, if you have a double winner, say one team wins their division twice, it goes to the wild card, which is the top team in either division who has not won their division, and it's by overall record. So they are behind the competition significantly when it comes to the wild card races. And frankly, if they win enough games to make that up, I suspect they'll win their division. So I think it has to be division championship or bust in the second half. Again, that's what they got to be building to here. They're struggling in one-run games. They've lost a lot of those. They're dealing with a ton of the pitcher injuries. So they're still hoping to turn this around because you like to think one-run games tend to be a coin flip. Now, it could also indicate lack of depth on the back end, but we're going to say that is a sign that things are easy to turn around. Their Pythag, their projected record based on runs scored and allowed, has them around 500. So they should be able to bounce back here. However, based on the expectations, we can't give them anything more than a D+ for the first quarter, which is kind of shocking to say. But here we are. Shocking, coming up 3 times in your report card is not great, unless it's great. It goes both ways. It doesn't matter. Talking about not great, let's talk about the Hagerstown Flying Boxers. They are 9-32 to start the season, 18 games back in the North. Gary Mattis, he has been fun to watch. He's putting up crazy numbers anchoring this lineup, and that is where my positive was. I mean everything else. Historically bad start to this year. They saw Mark Mason fired after a 6-21 start. Mark Mason being fired is like kind of mind-blowing, if anyone knows. Guys love him. He tends to be successful. You can point to the last few years at York, and then Empire State is questionable. I think his record in like the last couple years was like under 300, I think, as a manager. But think about his last job assignments. Empire State, then year 1 Hagerstown, now this season. However, it doesn't help that York has been so successful since he left, and I think that's sort of Hagerstown's an organization that wants to win. So they went a different direction. They brought in Shane Turner, but again, they lose 6 in a row to start that tenure. And I think they're like 2-8 since. I don't know. Hold on, I can do the math. They're 3-11 since in the Shane Turner era. So that's tough. Nearly a -3 run differential per game. They're scoring the least runs. They're allowing the most in the league. there's a ton to fix here. If I'm looking for a positive, at least ownership seems interested in winning games. So if you're a Flying Boxcars fan, the ownership also wants them winning ball games. So hey, at least management does. I don't know how decision making is working over there right now, but there it is. The grade, I hate to do it, especially because expectations were low and winning wasn't even the main concern. But this has kind of been an outlier, like a beyond what we feared for Hagerstown. Got to give them an F for the first quarter. I hate to do it, but it is what it is. Let's get positive. Thankfully, we have High Point next in alphabetical order. The Rockers are 29-12. They're 8 games up in the South. So much good to say about High Point. The best record in the league. They're leading the South comfortably. The best offense in the league. The best pitching staff in the league. It's given them a run differential of over 2 runs per game. Despite guys getting their contracts purchased, they're still holding in there. The team's depth is holding up well. That's an issue that's bit them in the past. So far, so good. The lineup is really difficult to work through. DJ Burt, Luis Gonzalez, Ben Aklinski, Drew Mendoza, Max Vieira, even a guy like Jack Conley's been raking. They're dangerous. They can beat you a bunch of different ways. They're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. They're currently 18-6, if I remember right, on teams below 500. Might actually have improved that the last couple games. Might be up to 20-6, depending on where they're at. Now, we could be concerned if we're trying to nitpick about the Rockers being like 9-6 against above 500 teams. They're 6-6 since their season opening sweep of Southern Maryland. Other teams score first on them a lot. 28 out of 41 games, they've allowed the other team to score first. But they've still won 18 of those 28 games after spotting their team a lead. So what do you do with this team? They're so good. They have time to fine-tune these details. They should have the entire second half to prepare for their playoff push. It's worth mentioning just how good this rotation is. Speaking of playoffs and what this team could look like, the rotation's top 4 has been Emmanuel, Bearclaw, Ullman, Solter. They have a 3.13 ERA combined. The team's 24-6 in games that one of those 4 has pitched. Things are setting up well for the Rockers, a team that's been snake-bitten since joining the league as far as playoff runs go. I think this is probably their best chance to bring a title to High Point. They've been close. They've been knocking on the door. They've been screwed by the 2-half system a couple times. So far, it's an A+. Not the only A+ in this class, but certainly the strongest in my mind. Moving on, going back to the North, we're talking the Lancaster Stormers. They're 21-20. They're 6 games back in the North Division. This team is already on the upswing. They're 17-9 since a 4-11 start. Pitching and hitting is right around league average, and that's after a bad start, so they're kind of above recently. Struggling with consistency, though. They just lost a series to Hagerstown last week before absolutely crushing them in the final game of that set, so they show both sides. The peripherals are not great for the offense, but putting the ball in play and making teams make plays seems to be a strategy that's working for them right now. The starting pitching, though, they have just not been good. Currently relying on a mix of Keelan Kilgore, Noah Bremer, Noah Skiro, the pair of Noahs, by the way. Kind of love that. AJ Alexi and Max Green, they have a combined 5.30-ish ERA, not good enough. They also have a couple batters like Ariel Sandoval who need to just find their way, to find their footing in the second half, kind of counting on them to do more. They're making moves to improve their pitching right now. They brought in Cody Stashik over the weekend. They pushed Christian Scafidi off to Trois-Rivières, and he was struggling, so that might help them a little bit. The bullpens looked pretty solid to begin with. It's continuing to improve. They're not fully out of first half contention. They do have some games against York, so they could catch up. But I think they're probably doing enough to give us a return of that second half Stormers stereotype that we have for them in the second half. And well, bad news for the league. Also, Slater Shields. Slater Shields a dog. I've been talking about him for a minute. I saw him in the preseason. Seen him since. I like him. I think he's going to be great. Started slow offensively. He's up to like 280. Kid's nasty. Fun in the field. He's got an energy to him. I like Slater Shields. Wouldn't be super surprised if he gets picked up at some point. He's so young. Different thing. Real potential there, though. I'm just here on the microphone. Pausing. I'm not going to delete that. We're not editing this out. It's report cards. We're getting real with each other. You feel me? That said, I'm giving them a C because it's a good start, but you are 5 games behind York, and there's some things to work on here. Let's talk about the Lexington Legends. They're 20-21, 9 games back in the South. First of all, this is much better than we expected from Lexington, right? I think we can agree. They've taken on a lot of younger guys. They trusted them to compete in a top indie league. The pitching is battling well, has been above average considering their pitcher-friendly ballpark. The offense has been putting the ball in play. They're stealing bags. They're maintaining pressure, using small ball when the time is right. However, where's my Stephen A. Smith? However, a lot of that good stuff is kind of left over from the 12-4 start, which was ripping and terrifying. Since then, they're 8-17. The offense has held fairly steady if we're looking at what's causing this. Fairly steady. They went from scoring 5.75 of a run over that first 16-game stretch to 5 runs per game, rather, since then. I mean, you don't love it going backwards, but like that's still pretty good. They're still battling. The pitching, though, it really seems to not be holding up. I had said on Indie Ball Report podcast, would check that out every Saturday, to Nick after that 12-4 start, I'm a little worried about what happens when these pitchers start seeing offenses twice, because a lot of them were from the Pioneer League, a lot of them were from random spots where you don't really, there was a lack of familiarity. I mean, you might have a lot of guys on Atlantic League lineup, just behind the scenes here, that have seen Atlantic League pitchers for years, American Association pitchers, even Frontier League guys. Very little familiarity with recent Pioneer League pitchers. So a lot of the times what you're seeing them throw, like the scouting report you're getting, the pitch mix is just from what your first batters see in some of these games. Of course, they have some data as the season goes on, but early on, that was for 16 games, you didn't have much. So that pitching, they allowed just 3.36 runs per game. That was best in the league over the first 16 games. Since then has allowed about 7 runs per game. So more than twice as many. And that's really where I think this issue is coming from. There's some real talent in this lineup. Brady Whalen, Curtis Terry, Pedro Gonzalez, Zane Washington, who's shown up from the Pioneer League. He was a dog over there, and he's delivered in the same way in the Atlantic League. I like that for him. I love him. It's Zane with an X. Don't misspell that thing. They've all stepped up in a big way, especially since Drew Ellis's contract got purchased. We're like, uh-oh, what happens now? They've been doing it. This team's certainly better than expected, especially at the plate. If they can add some stability on that pitching staff, there is a good chance this team finds a way to at least ask some questions of the division leaders in the second half. So considering what the expectations were and where they're at, it's a C+. Long Island Ducks. We're 22-19 so far, 5 games back in the North. And this is a bold one. I'm going to prep this in advance. There's going to be some disagreement on this grade. Doesn't matter. Long Island's continue their bounce back from, if you remember last year, they had a slow first half under the first year of Lou Ford's management. They kind of built back in the second half and looked better. They're competitive. They show real signs of continuing that build back for the Ducks. They had a 1-5 start to the year. Since then, they're 21-14. They've won 8 of 11 series this year. Offensively, the lineup is, in my mind, the best in the league. The Ducks haven't been shut out once over their first 41 games. They've scored 10 or more runs 10 times, including 10 runs exactly 6 times, which is kind of funny. They do seem to be struggling a bit with lesser, they're playing down the competition sometimes, it feels like. I've just seen some really unimpressive performances from them against teams they should be beating pretty handily. But they've been battling and playing well against good opponents, so who knows? A lot of that might be inconsistencies in their pitching staff, especially the rotation. Outside of Mitchell Senger in that rotation, they're currently posting an ERA above 6, which is not getting it done. That's not going to work. On the plus side, though, the bullpen currently has a combined ERA in the mid-3s, and last week they pitched 24 innings and had a .73 ERA. So they can be an absolute menace to society. Braden Nelson, Jonah Dipoto, Peyton Williams have the potential to be one of the best bullpen trios in indie ball. I put Jacob Asa and Brad Case in that sort of conversation as well. Really a lot of options to go to there. The Ducks are setting up really nicely for a potential second half run here. They're winning games. They're getting player contracts purchased. I think they're leading the league in contract purchases right now. Perhaps most importantly, by the way, for the team and my take for the league is they're kind of looking like the Ducks again. They're kind of looking like the Death Star is being rebuilt. You know what I mean? For all those reasons, I'm taking the big swing here. This is something they're going to have to show me a lot to keep up with this grade. I'm giving them an A+ for the first quarter. This is not, based as much on record as what we're seeing on the whole from them. And that's no further questions. Southern Maryland Blue Crabs. They're 21-20. They're 8 games back in the South. Very similar to the Legends, if I can call back to that, in that I'm not sure that the direction they're heading in this year is super promising, but they've outperformed expectations by so much at this point that it deserves recognition. And that's what they're going to get. Offensively, Brett Barrera, he's been impressive. Giovanni DiGiacomo has been unbelievably good in that lineup, man. His transition in the Atlantic League could not have gone better for him. On the mound, the pitching staff has kept the team in most games, which is kind of all you can ask. Limited the damage after losing a large number of innings that Daryl Thompson would typically cover, which is, again, big. Now, for the concerns, outside of an 11-1 stretch that they had to start May, this team is 10-19. They're struggling to string together wins. The pitching and the hitting is below league average. It's really been exposed in some games where like they kind of need to lean back on depth and there's just nothing to pull from. On the bright side, the team ends the first half with games against Gastonia, Lexington, Charleston, Hagerstown. Those are 4 teams that they've either played well against or they should match up well with and at least have an opportunity to get wins off of. If they can set themselves up to be competitive in this wildcard race, because that's the importance. I don't think they'd catch York, but that wildcard race we talked about earlier, this is a good opportunity for them to catch up a bit, or at least position themselves where they're within striking distance of potential wildcard leaders. And keep in mind, if there is a wildcard race happening, that means one of the other top teams currently in that wildcard race is now a division winner. So they're out of the way too in those standings. So it's a complicated picture, but keep that in mind. So if they can set themselves up for that race, we may be paying attention to this Crabs team late into the summer. And that's big for the Blue Crabs. Accepting that they do have weaknesses, their progress here is still noteworthy. I'm giving them a C+ for the first quarter. All right, we're heading down the stretch here. Let's talk about the Staten Island Ferry Hawks. 19-22 to start the year, 8 games back in the North. The Ferry Hawks are a tough one to grade, I'll say. Their offense has been good at times, great at others. The bullpen has some studs. Christian Allegretti and Morgan McSweeney have stolen the show in their rotation. It sort of makes it hard to believe that this team is on like an 11-21 stretch right now over the last 32 and that includes a losing streak. They lost 7 games in a row against Lancaster, who's kind of struggling before just getting hot against Staten Island. The hard truth here is that there's just no pitching depth in this rotation, and there is not enough bullpen consistency to make that float, if that makes sense. That's led to stretches like this recent one where the offense went cold, they struggled for several games in a row, lost a bunch, and then the offense got hot, and then the pitching gave out because they scored 49 runs in 6 games and were only able to go 2-4 over that stretch. You just can't have that. That's brutal. The good news is that this is salvageable. There's some pitching depth that would go a long way to keeping them in the North Division if they were able to add it. That could see, by the way, this North Division race probably is setting up to have like 4 teams all kind of knocking each other down. So if you're Staten Island, you're hoping no team is going to get too far ahead. That means you can kind of get some growing pains out of the way, continue to add, and not be too far out once you feel like you have your full team ready to roll. I wouldn't call this first quarter a step in the right direction. I would say from this first quarter as a base, there is room to make this next step that Staten Island's been trying to make for the past few years. I'm giving it a C-, just based on this team did compete until like the last week of the season last year for a playoff spot. And this has been a little bit disappointing, especially after the hot start this year. So that's where they're at. The C- is not a condemnation, but it is a statement on, I think, the rising expectations for Staten Island Ferry Hawks, which is what you want to see. Last but not least, certainly not least, it's the York Revolution. 27-14 to start the year. They're 5 games up in the North. The team's offense is relentless. Like, I've seen them now 4 times. I've seen them play 4 or 5 games at this point. And every single one of them, I think, they're down at some point and just keep chipping away, keep fighting back. They at least are going to make you waste high leverage bullpen arms at like best for you. At worst, they're going to come back. With Costas, Tostado, Weller, several other dangerous bats in that lineup, it just leads don't feel safe. They have 9 come from behind wins already. It's an offense that makes you pay for mistakes. It makes the most out of like any extra out you're going to give them. The pitching, in my opinion, is potentially better than the offense. That might be a hot take. The bullpen's got a bunch of different arms like Cam Robinson and Noah Denoyer who can really shut you down, kill a rally. The rotation outside of like a weird week last week has delivered most days in a way which gives the lineup at least an opportunity to do their thing. That's why they're able to come from behind because games aren't getting out of hand very often. The team does lack some consistency. They're dropping, like, for instance, random series to the Blue Crabs or the Ferry Hawks and then turning around and just clubbing the hell out of another potential playoff team. So they'll do that. But the team is winning most of their series pretty comfortably. They're putting the league sort of on notice in this bid for a repeat. And if they can finish out this first half strong, whoever wants to compete with them in the playoffs from either the division or, you know, wherever they're coming from, are going to have a really tough matchup. York can be pretty strategic setting up their roster if they can finish out this first half and setting up, you know, who they can rest and who's going to be fresh for the playoffs and what they can add. This is going to be a dangerous team if they can finish out this first half and set up for that playoff run. It's exactly what you want to do in this sort of league. York is in a prime position to take advantage of the two-half system. The grade, frankly, to be the man, you got to beat the man. I'm giving them an A+. So if we're going to go backwards here, I'll give you a quick reminder of what we got. I got an A+ for the York Revolution, a C- for the Staten Island Ferry Hawks, a C+ for the Southern Maryland Blue Crabs, and A+ for the Long Island Ducks, a C+ for the Lexington Legends, a C for the Lancaster Stormers, an A+ for the High Point Rockers, an F for the Hagerstown Flying Boxcars, a D+ for the Gastonia Ghost Peppers, and a C+ for the Charleston Dirty Birds. That is it. Let me know what you think about it. Like, subscribe. I said it. I never say it. I said it this time. Check us out on podcast platforms. It's me. Whatever. And YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. It's a mess. Follow. Or don't. I respect it.